Hello everyone, and welcome. In today's video, we're exploring the latest thought-provoking article by Dr. Turki Faisal Al Rasheed, published in Arab News. Today's article is titled, Beyond the Dust, Saudi Arabia's Environmental Transformation. Before we begin, let me introduce the author. Dr. Turki Faisal Al Rasheed is a Saudi businessman, academic, author, and internationally recognized thought leader. He serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Arizona and as an advisor to the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences at the American University of Beirut. As the founder of Golden Grass, Inc., Dr. Al Rasheed combines academic excellence with practical leadership, offering insightful perspectives on agriculture, sustainability, economic development, and public policy. He is also the author of the recently published book, Saudi Arabia: Transformation, Uncertainty, and Sustainability, which examines the kingdom's evolving economic and social landscape, highlighting the opportunities, challenges, and strategies shaping its long-term sustainable future. Now, let's dive into today's article and discover how Saudi Arabia has achieved what many once believed was impossible, a remarkable 99% victory over desert dust.
Usually when we talk about the weather, there's this underlying expectation of total surrender.
Right. Yeah. It's treated almost like gravity.
Exactly. I mean, the sky gets dark, the wind picks up, and you just brace for impact. You assume nature's going to do whatever nature wants to do.
And your only real option is just to get out of the way.
Yeah.
It is entirely reactionary. You board up the windows, pull your car over to the shoulder, endure the onslaught, and then you just try to clean up the mess afterward.
A strategy of total surrender. But today we are looking at something that fundamentally breaks that rule. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are so used to doom scrolling through climate news, rising temperatures, extreme weather, the works. But today we are unpacking an incredible, almost unbelievable, really environmental transformation happening right now in July 2026.
Yeah, because it is incredibly rare to be able to say humanity actually won a round against extreme weather.
Won a round. I love that. And to help you wrap your head around this, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today.
And I got some great material.
Yeah, we've got local news reports tracking a massive dust storm that just hit Arizona a few days ago. And we are pairing that with a recent article from Arab News by Dr. Turki Faisal Al Rasheed. He details Saudi Arabia's historic decline in dust storms.
Which is just a wild contrast.
It really is. And to figure out how they actually pull it off, we are leaning heavily on an academic book excerpt by Dr. Al Rasheed covering this thing called the Food-Water Security Nexus.
Right, which looks at the governance behind the Saudi Green Initiative.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out exactly how a nation stops a natural disaster in its tracks, why environmentalism is suddenly like hardcore national security, and what this actually means for the future of our planet.
Section 1. The 99% victory. The lowest dust activity in over 25 years. When the National Center of Meteorology and the Regional Center for Dust and Sandstorms dropped their data, it was genuinely mind-blowing. This wasn't some tiny statistical bump. It was the lowest dust activity recorded in more than a quarter of a century. The northern borders region of Saudi Arabia didn't just see a reduction. They hit a staggering 100% decline in dust storms, a complete zeroing out. Meanwhile, the central and eastern regions, which include massive economic hubs like Riyadh and Dammam, saw a 99% drop compared to historical rates. To put that into perspective, back in the 1990s, dust storm frequency was through the roof. We're talking dozens of major events every single year. But then you see this progressive improvement over time. By 2025, there's a 50% drop. And then boom, 2026 hits, and it's a steep, dramatic plunge down to near zero. That kind of long-term structural change tells us this is definitely not a random fluke of the weather.
And to appreciate what a 99% victory over a natural phenomenon looks like, we need a stark reminder of what happens when nature just runs its course.
Right. So let's look at the American Southwest for that baseline.
Yeah. On July 12, 2026, The Arizona monsoon season kicked off with a massive dust storm, which is commonly known as a haboob.
Haboob.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen one of these in person or even in a video, they are genuinely terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't look like normal wind. It looks like a solid mile-high wall of earth just swallowing a city whole.
Yeah, the physical power of it is immense. I mean, researchers at Arizona State University, including teaching professor Ryan Heinzman, they recently developed a dust storm scale to classify the severity of these events.
Kind of like how we categorize hurricanes or tornadoes.
Exactly like that. And they classified this specific July 12th storm as a Category 3 out of 5 event.
Wow, Category 3.
Right. And that means sustained 39-mile-per-hour wind gusts, driving a dense wall of particulate matter. It resulted in 4 straight hours of drastically reduced visibility.
4 hours of just choking on airborne dirt. And the local reporting really paints a vivid picture of the scale. There was a storm chaser named Michael Binsky who was out near Casa Grande tracking this system,
Right.
and he noted that the scope of it was just wild.
It really was.
It stretched almost all the way from the Mexican border up through Gila Bend and straight into Phoenix and Buckeye.
And a storm of that magnitude essentially paralyzes civic infrastructure. I mean, the conditions degraded so quickly that the Arizona Department of Transportation, ADOT, had their automated dust detection sensors triggered on the most vulnerable sections of Interstate 10.
Oh, right, the automated systems.
Yeah, the system had to automatically drop the speed limits down to 45 miles per hour. And at the junction where the Loop 202 and US 60 meet, visibility plummeted to near zero.
Just total whiteout, but with dirt.
Basically. And then rain started mixing with the dust, coating literally everything in mud.
Gosh. And, the community response on the ground is always so telling in these moments.
For sure.
The local news highlighted the East Coronado neighborhood in Phoenix, where neighbors were literally out in the immediate aftermath with chainsaws.
Wow, chainsaw!
Yeah, helping each other clear massive fallen trees from driveways. One neighbor, Brandon Gartley, gave an interview talking about how everyone just instinctively looks out for each other when these storms hit.
Which is great.
It's a beautiful display of community resilience, but when you zoom out and look at the official state protocol, I mean, ADOT's advice is literally pull off the road, turn off your engine, turn off your lights, take your foot off the brake, and wait it out.
Right. It is the coping mechanism we mentioned earlier, just waiting out the inevitable.
Surrender. But then, and this is where it gets crazy, we look at the data coming out of Saudi Arabia's National Center of Meteorology for June 2026.
Yeah, this is the turning point.
The Saudi data suggests a completely different reality. They didn't just wait it out, they recorded a near zero incidence of dust and sandstorms.
Let me just emphasize that. Near zero.
We are looking at a 99% average decline compared to their historical rates. 99%.
It's unbelievable. And the regional breakdown of that data is even more striking when you consider the geography. I mean, the Northern Borders region saw a 100% reduction.
Literally zero dust storms.
Zero dust storms.
Yeah.
And the central region, which includes major population centers like Riyadh, Qasim, and Al-Kharj, and the eastern region, including Al-Asa, Dammam, and Dahan, all saw a 99% drop.
That is just, that's wild.
Yeah, this represents the lowest dust activity they have recorded in over a quarter century of continuous monitoring.
Okay, we need to unpack this. We just established that a Category 3 haboob can stretch from Mexico to Phoenix and shut down a major interstate.
Right.
It is wind and sand. You can't build a glass dome over an entire country.
No, you can't.
So how on earth do you turn off a dust storm?
Well, you don't fight the wind, you anchor the earth.
Anchor the earth.
Yeah. That core realization is the driving mechanism behind the Saudi Green Initiative, or the SGI.
The SGI.
Yeah.
Which is part of their broader Vision 2030 platform, right?
Exactly.
And the sheer scale of the investment here is just difficult to wrap your head around. We're talking over 80 different initiatives backed by investments exceeding 705 billion Saudi riyals.
It's massive.
The overarching goals are huge. Reaching net zero emissions by 2060, cutting carbon emissions by 278 million tons per year by 2030, and protecting 30% of all land and sea in the kingdom.
But the headline goal, the one that really catches the eye when we talk about stopping a dust storm, is their commitment to planting 10 billion trees.
10 billion.
10 billion trees over the coming decades. It is an unprecedented afforestation and land regeneration effort across millions of hectares.
Okay, so planting trees stops the dust.
Yeah, the underlying logic is that by expanding the vegetation cover, the root systems stabilize the topsoil. You basically eliminate the erosion sources so that when the wind inevitably does blow, the loose particulate matter simply isn't there to be picked up and turned into a storm.
Okay, hold on. I have to throw a flag on the play here because there is a glaring timeline issue.
Oh, the 2021 launch date.
Yeah. The Saudi Green Initiative was launched in 2021. The data showing a 99% drop in dust storms is from 2026.
Right.
That is a 5-year window. You cannot grow a mature soil anchoring forest of 10 billion trees in 5 years, especially in a hyper-arid desert.
Oh, absolutely not.
So what actually caused the drop today? Like right now?
Well, that's the thing. The 10 billion trees represent the long-term, multi-decade goal. The 99% reduction we are seeing in 2026 is actually the result of immediate, aggressive, short-term tactical interventions.
Okay, like what?
Well, you don't need a 50-foot tree to stop dust. You just need to keep the top layer of dirt from moving. So one of the things the government implemented was strict regulations on livestock grazing.
Grazing regulations.
Yeah, to stop animals from stripping away the existing native shrubs and grasses.
Oh, I see. So just by letting the desert's natural low-level vegetation recover, you get an immediate anchoring effect.
Exactly. And add to that an aggressive cloud seeding program.
Okay, I've heard of that for making rain, but how does that stop dust?
Well, they aren't just trying to fill reservoirs. They are intentionally increasing soil moisture across vast tracts of open desert. Wet dirt is heavy dirt.
Wet dirt is heavy dirt, of course.
Yeah, it doesn't blow away.
Okay, that makes so much more sense. But still planting 10 billion trees in a desert sounds like trying to build a massive sandcastle at high tide.
It does.
I mean, the environment naturally wants to reject it, and it brings up a massive technical question for me.
Which is?
Where does the water come from to keep a project of this scale alive? If you are pumping ancient non-renewable groundwater just to water saplings, aren't you just creating a massive new ecological crisis down the line?
That exact tension is the central focus of Dr. Al Rasheed's book, and it introduces a framework called the Food Water Security Nexus, or FWSN. Yeah, it basically argues that environmental policy can never be siloed. You can't just have a Ministry of Trees doing its own thing, completely blind to what the Ministry of Water is doing. In a hyper-arid state, everything must be hyper-integrated.
Hyper-integrated. So how does that integration actually work on the ground? You mentioned cloud seeding for the soil.
Yeah.
But how do you manage 10 billion trees without draining the aquifers?
Well, it requires an entire ecosystem of advanced technology just to monitor the baseline. They use LiDAR mapping, which is essentially bouncing lasers off the Earth from aircraft or satellites to create highly detailed 3D topographical maps.
Okay, so they know the exact layout of the land.
Right, so they know exactly where water naturally pools and where planting will be most efficient. And they pair that with AeroNet systems.
AeroNet, break that down for us.
It is a global network of ground-based sensors that literally look up at the sky and measure optical depth. Meaning they measure exactly how much sunlight is being blocked by aerosols and dust in the atmosphere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and by cross-referencing AeroNet data with satellite imagery, they can pinpoint the exact square mile of desert where a dust storm is originating and then target that specific area for immediate land rehabilitation.
So it's not just randomly planting trees and hoping for the best?
No, not at all.
It is a highly targeted, data-driven deployment of resources. Yeah. You map the terrain with LiDAR, you track the dust origins with AeroNet, you coax rain from the sky with cloud seeding, and you manage the grazing on the ground.
And the FWSN framework pushes it even further. You have to link all of this to energy and agriculture.
How so?
Well, if you need water for the trees, you rely on desalination, but desalination requires a massive amount of energy. If you power those desalination plants with fossil fuels, you increase carbon emissions.
Which drives up global temperatures.
Exactly, which increases evaporation, which means you need even more water for the trees.
Wow, it is a feedback loop from hell.
It really is.
If you plant trees that require too much water, you have to run your desalination plants harder. Running those plants burns more fuel, heating up the very environment you were trying to cool down, evaporating the water you just spent millions of reals to produce.
which is why the transition to renewable energy is a mandatory component of the Green Initiative. You have to power the desalination with solar or wind to break that feedback loop. The water, the energy, and the agriculture are entirely interdependent.
But I mean, spending 705 billion reals to rewire an entire nation's ecosystem isn't something you can just do on a whim.
Definitely not.
The book excerpt features a roundtable dialogue with specialists in sustainable development, environmental governance, and climate policy who really pressure test this transition. And they present some serious structural constraints.
Right. So the proponents at the roundtable argue that this massive investment moves the environment from being a, fringe issue to a central pillar of national security. They argue that a green economy complements the existing hydrocarbon economy. By investing in cleaner industrial processes and ESG-aligned infrastructure, Saudi Arabia is diversifying its growth model and making itself highly attractive to international capital.
But the critics in the roundtable point out the terrifying reality of that feedback loop we just talked about.
Yeah, they do.
First and foremost, water scarcity. The per capita renewable water availability in Saudi Arabia is far below global scarcity thresholds. They are already relying heavily on non-renewable groundwater.
And then you layer on the ecological feasibility. As you pointed out earlier, you can't just plant any tree.
Right.
Selecting the wrong species could mean billions of dollars wasted on saplings that either die in the heat or consume so much water they crash the local water table.
And there is the economic tightrope. The book calls it transition volatility. Let me see if I have this straight. The fiscal base of the country is still heavily tied to hydrocarbons. So if global oil prices take a massive dip, the funding for all these green initiatives could dry up. And if the funding dries up, the cloud seeding stops, the tree maintenance stops, the roots die, and the dust storms come roaring back.
Exactly. The entire system is built on continuous investment and maintenance. If the pace of these green investments isn't perfectly aligned with macroeconomic realities, the government risks severe fiscal pressure.
And managing all of this requires a level of bureaucratic coordination that is almost unheard of. You have 80 different initiatives across multiple ministries.
It's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, you have to ensure that the Agriculture Ministry promoting food security isn't accidentally draining the water reserves that the Environment Ministry needs to keep the dust-blocking trees alive.
Right.
So when you look at all these constraints, the water scarcity, the energy demands, the economic volatility, doesn't this prove that the entire system is incredibly fragile?
Actually, the roundtable experts would agree with you. That fragility is actually the core of the first hypothesis of the FWSN concept. Interdependence amplifies vulnerabilities.
Interdependence amplifies vulnerabilities. So it's essentially like a biological food web.
Yes, exactly.
If you remove one predator, the entire ecosystem crashes. If policy fails in one domain, say, they miscalculate the water conservation targets, it doesn't just mean people have to take shorter showers. It produces cascading stress.
Yep.
The trees die, the topsoil loosens, the AeroNet sensors go dark, and the Haboob returns.
A failure does not stay contained. It amplifies across every sector.
So how on earth does a government manage a system where any single failure can trigger a catastrophic cascade?
The consensus among the roundtable experts is a concept called adaptive governance.
Adaptive governance.
Yeah, you cannot set a 10-year target, write a check, and walk away. It requires constant data monitoring, institutional learning, and this is key, the political willingness to change course immediately when projects fall short.
So it is basically treating national environmental policy like a tech startup.
That's a great way to put it.
You beta test a specific species of shrub in a specific region. You look at the LiDAR and AeroNet data. And if the plants are dying or consuming too much water, you pivot immediately instead of stubbornly sticking to a rigid 5-year plan.
Because resilience is not a static goal, you eventually cross off a list. It is a constant, ongoing balancing act. Technological innovation alone, no matter how advanced the desalination or cloud seeding gets, cannot guarantee resilience without that accountable, highly flexible implementation.
Which brings up a really concerning geographical reality.
Oh, the transboundary issue.
Yeah, because even if Saudi Arabia perfectly manages its own internal food-water security nexus, even if they balance the budget, manage the water perfectly, and anchor every inch of their soil weather, does not carry a passport.
It sure doesn't.
A massive dust storm can form in a neighboring country, blow right across the border, and undo all of that hard work in an afternoon.
And Saudi Arabia recognized this limitation early on. A domestic strategy is inherently incomplete if the ecosystems of the surrounding region are collapsing. And this realization gave birth to the Middle East Green Initiative, or MGI.
MGI. And the numbers on the MGI are even wilder than the domestic program. We talked about 10 billion trees for the Saudi Green Initiative. The Middle East Green Initiative has a unified goal of planting 50 billion trees total.
50 billion.
That is the 10 billion inside Saudi Arabia, plus an additional 40 billion distributed across the wider Arab world.
And this regional expansion validates the second hypothesis from Dr. Al Rasheed's book, Resilience Redefines National Strength.
Redefines it.
Yeah, environmental stewardship is no longer viewed as just, going green for good public relations. It is now recognized as a critical, cooperative, regional security project.
Because the threats are entirely transboundary. A Haboob forming in Iraq or Syria will sweep into Saudi airspace. Food price volatility caused by droughts in one nation creates economic instability in another.
Right, and we've seen how extreme weather events can choke global shipping lanes and disrupt supply chains for entire continents.
Exactly.
Land restoration and emissions reduction across the broader Arab world have direct, immediate implications for desertification control and protecting human livelihoods across multiple sovereign states.
Here is where it gets really interesting for you listening. We traditionally think of national security strictly in terms of military might, tanks, fighter jets, border walls, and radar systems.
Sure.
But what this framework suggests is that a nation's strongest border defense against a transboundary threat, like a Category 3 Haboob, might actually be a forest planted 3 countries away.
It's incredible to think about.
Trees and cloud seeding are literally the new geopolitical defense systems.
It is a profound paradigm shift, and it perfectly validates the third FWSN hypothesis. Integration demands whole of government and regional cooperation. A strategy confined purely to national borders is inherently fragile when you are dealing with environmental shocks that are regional or global in scale.
It fundamentally changes how we view diplomacy. You aren't just sitting down to negotiate trade deals or border disputes anymore. You are negotiating ecological survival.
And Saudi Arabia's experience with the SGI is essentially offering a transferable governance model for broader Arab resilience. It proves that the food-water security nexus isn't just an abstract academic theory discussed in university roundtables.
It's happening.
It is happening, and it is a highly practical, necessary guide for survival in hyper-arid, import-dependent states facing intense climate stress.
Well, let's take a breath and look at the massive journey we've covered today.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
We started by looking at a Category 3 Haboob rolling across Arizona, where the official protocol and really the cultural mindset is to pull over, turn off your lights, and endure nature's wrath. A strategy of waiting it out.
A strategy of total surrender.
And then we discovered how a coordinated, massive-scale investment in the precise nexus of food, water, and security allowed Saudi Arabia to achieve a 99% reduction in dust storms by June 2026.
Which is still just a mind-blowing statistic.
Right. They didn't build a wall to fight the wind. They used grazing regulations, cloud seeding, and advanced data mapping to anchor the earth. It shows us what is actually possible when governments stop treating the environment as a side project and start treating it as critical national infrastructure.
It requires immense financial resources, hyper-vigilant monitoring, and a willingness to adapt on the fly. But the empirical data proves that it can yield unprecedented, tangible results.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling thread to pull on. We've talked about how these interventions redefine national security and require massive financial and technological investments.
Right.
So if we're entering an era where well-resourced nations can literally re-engineer their ecosystems, calming the winds and stopping the dust storms at the border, what happens to the global balance of power?
That is the million-dollar question.
Are we heading toward a future where a clear sky and clean air aren't just natural human rights, but luxury assets that only some nations can afford to build for themselves?
Something for you to chew on next time the wind starts blowing. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
As we come to the end of today's discussion, we're reminded that the fight against environmental challenges is not just about technology, it's about vision, determination, and long-term commitment. Through this article, Dr. Turki Faisal Al Rasheed highlights how Saudi Arabia's bold strategies, innovative solutions, and sustainable development efforts are transforming one of the world's greatest natural challenges into a remarkable success story. If you'd like to read the complete article, you'll find the link in the description below, or you can visit arabnews.com for the full publication. To learn more about Dr. Turki Faisal Al Rasheed, his research, publications, and latest insights, visit www.tfrasheed.com. desertification.org. If you found this video informative, please support our channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support helps us continue bringing you thoughtful discussions on global affairs, sustainability, innovation, and the future of Saudi Arabia. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay inspired, stay curious. We'll see you in the next video.